welcome to Suffragette City Radio, a lockdown edition. I'm DJ Lippy.
I'm Sobry Maid. We're actually in the same room.
Yeah, wow.
Oh my God, it's been about 6 months since we've done this.
Yep.
Abiding by social distancing. We've got a new toy in the middle of us.
We're following the 2 metre rule.
But yeah, it's nice to be back. So we managed to do a lockdown episode about Corona.
Yeah.
But the other big story apart from Corona that's been happening during lockdown is the protests about Black Lives Matter.
Yes, everything's gone a bit crazy, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's all, there's been protests and riots and...
Counter-protests.
Yeah.
People pissing on statues, defacing statues, tearing statues down.
I'm sick of hearing about statues.
Yeah.
Because we're just talking about statues instead of the actual issues.
Yeah. Well, people like to talk about statues. They like nice symbology, but I mean, if you just tear down a statue, but you don't tear down the systems of oppression, then you've basically just got no statues.
I mean, pretty much. It's just, it's just a soundbite, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's easy to attack a statue. A statue can't run away, can it? Do you know what I mean? It's true. Go after Boris Johnson. No, don't do that. Don't do that. In this day and age, you don't want to be saying stuff like that, do you?
No, I know. You get a knock on the door.
Yeah, we'll cut that out, won't we? You can edit that out.
I think you're relying too much on my editing skills. I'm just afraid now that you're going to get a knock on the door, you know, with the Corona laws.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Rozzers can just knock on your door and be like, are you sure you don't have Corona? Well, under these new powers...
Don't kill Boris Johnson.
We can take you away.
Don't kill Boris Johnson. He's a very nice man, I'm sure. He's got too many kids to kill.
Yeah, I think I might need to take some of this out. Yeah, but we've been watching the Black Lives Matter stuff unfold both in the US and the UK and globally at the moment, and we thought we would have a look at the issues that specifically affect Black women. Yeah,
Black women in the UK, because I think as valuable and as important as the movement is, I think there's a lot of emphasis on the men who die in police custody in America, and as sympathetic as I am to that cause, there's very little that as British citizens that we can do about, what another country does in another country. A lot of it focuses on black men, and black women often get left behind. We wanted to do one about the issues that affect black British women in this country, because they might actually be able to do something about it.
Yes, yeah. So what are you talking about today?
I am going to be talking about the shocking fact that black women are 5 times more likely to die during childbirth. So during the pregnancy and during actual childbirth, and then like 3 months after, if you track those statistics, black women are 5 times more likely to die than white women.
That is shocking. I remember hearing that a while ago and finding it shocking, and just, being able to not really fathom why that would be. I'm going to be talking about Yarlswood Immigration Detention Centre, and basically it's an immigration detention centre for women in the UK, and it's a horror show basically. So I'll be talking about that.
Okay, fantastic. Shall I go first?
Yeah.
This statistic is based. There's a report released by Mothers and Babies Reducing Risk through audits and confidential inquiries. They did a report, MBRRACE UK, and they've done several reports actually, and each time they do a report it's buried and it's ignored, and it's pretty consistent throughout the years, and it's consistent. So they released a report that we found between 2015 and 2017, the chance of a death for a black woman was 38 out of 100,000, but it was 7 out of 100,000 for white women.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, and this was, it's still quite small in terms of mother mortality rate, like globally, but it's a staggering difference. It's 5 times as likely, and it's been consistent year on year. This organisation has done annual audits, and nothing's done about it. And
so it's not going down.
No.
I feel like 36 out of 100,000 is really high.
Yeah.
I'm shocked at that.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting actually is it's the same in America. It's roughly the same statistic in America as it is in the UK. So, there's obviously very different healthcare systems and setups, class differences. So yeah, They also found it gradiated down. So for black women, they're 5 times more likely. Mixed race women, they're 3 times more likely. Asian women are 2 times more likely than like white women as an average.
And white women are the least likely to die.
White women are the least likely to die. And it's found most women who died had multiple health problems or other vulnerabilities, such as addiction, abuse, or domestic violence.
Right.
So obviously there's an element of these statistics where if you're black, you're more likely to be from a lower economic background.
Institutional poverty.
Poverty, social
poverty.
deprivation, things like this. However, in America, they've done studies and they found that even when you differentiate for class, there is still a disparity between the races. For example, a black woman with a college education is more likely to die than a white woman who didn't finish high school.
Right. So there's clearly multiple things going on here. You've got poverty that's contributing to it because black people are more likely to be in poverty because of institutional racism. And then even if you remove that, there's still a problem here.
Yeah. And the problem is we don't know what the problem is.
Right.
So, you know. So, there's not really any research. So what we have now is just sort of guesswork, I suppose, especially in the UK. There's a petition at the moment. It has 139,000 signatures. It only needs 100,000, but we'll put a link in the description. It's good to show your concern about it. Basically asking the government to investigate this and find out what is going on, because we don't really know.
I wonder if part of it as well is, I was reading somewhere, so doctors and nurses, medical staff, very often underestimate women's pain.
Yeah.
And they especially underestimate, in comparison to men, and they especially underestimate black women's pain.
Yeah. Well, there's some research in America. So there was research done in May 2011 in Italy. So they showed, basically they did like a setup, and they showed people pictures of black people in pain and white people in pain. So basically they showed one of them, there was 2 pictures. One of them was they showed somebody being rubbed with an eraser, like mild pain, and the other one was like stabbed with a pin, and consistently found that the people were more likely to perceive the black people in less pain than the white people.
Right.
Even black people, they would perceive it as well, so they had internalized bias against themselves.
Right.
So and when they looked into it, I mean, one of the findings was it wasn't necessarily racism, but the assumption when they investigated it. So they did a study with nursing students, and all students thought that black people felt less pain than white people. And when they looked into it, they found it wasn't racism, but because they assumed that black people had like struggled more throughout their lives, they just thought they were tougher.
Right.
They'd had more adversity. But you know, this is, I mean, this has impact throughout the system because it's not only in healthcare. You know, you find if you're less sympathetic to black people, you know, in the criminal justice system, black kids get far more harsher sentence than white kids.
Yeah. Predicted grades as well. Teachers often predict grades lower for black students and Asian students or white students.
So it's a real problem, and it's I think there's more light being shone on the issue through Corona. I've noticed a couple of documentaries actually I've heard since we decided to cover this. I've heard a couple of things like, oh, they're going to study it again. So this is going to bring more light to it.
That's good. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about Serena Williams when she was pregnant and giving birth, because she had a medical issue. I can't remember the specifics of it, but basically she had to kind of fight the nurses a bit to take her seriously and to look into, I think she needed a blood test or something like that, and she had to fight for it, and they caught something, and she was fine and the baby was fine. But, you know, this is a woman who, you know, she's successful, she's
Mm-hmm.
known, she's very articulate, she's confident, and she really had to assert herself to be taken seriously, and it shouldn't be like that.
No, I mean, if it's happening with Serena Williams,
Yeah.
you know, then what chance does a working class woman,
Yeah.
you know, have? I mean, I think a lot of women feel like that out of place when they go into hospital to have a baby because they haven't had one before. A lot
Yeah.
of the times they are in the hands of the medical professionals,
Yeah.
and if they've not got a background, like a professional background, then it might be quite hard to challenge decisions. And also, you don't have a clue
Yeah.
what should happen in a delivery room, do you?
Yeah, you'll be afraid yourself, and you just want to trust, you know, what's happening around you. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a campaign going. There's a group called 5 Times More, and they are a group who want to bring attention to it. If you are on the Twitter, you can basically, there's a campaign. Take a selfie of yourself holding up 5 fingers with the hashtag 5 times more, hashtag 5 written X more, and it's to raise awareness of this issue. Because, you know, it's shocking. They're asking people to take steps if you're a black woman. The 5 steps they suggest: speak up about your concerns, find an advocate to support your claims, get a second opinion on a health diagnosis, trust your gut feeling, and make sure you've done your research when you go in there. But then this brings us back the importance of doulas.
Right.
Find yourself a doula. A doula is like, they're not a midwife, they're sort of like an advocate. They go into hospital with you and make sure that the medical teams are giving you like proper care, so they'll be on your side basically. And I think considering all these like structural barriers that you have, if you are like a woman of colour, it is worth investigating, finding yourself somebody to help you advocate, because it's not easy as well. Like, you're giving birth, so it's really hard to advocate while you're, you know, in incredible pain and going through such a sort of traumatic experience.
That strikes me as well, that black women, like, you're giving birth, you shouldn't have to think about all these things. You shouldn't have to go in and think, right, I need to do X, Y, Z. You know, it's I think definitely multi-pronged attack is needed. We need to help black women advocate for themselves, and then also try and address some of the structural roots that are making this happen in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there's more light being shone on the issue, shone on the issue. But like we always say on this programme, if you are concerned about this, write a letter to your MP.
Yeah.
Raise the issue with them. Say, this is something that I'm concerned about. There's a petition. We need to investigate what's happening and work out how to address the problem. Because if you don't know why something's happening, it's very hard to like stop it. You know. So yeah, we'll put some links in the descriptions of the podcast. We always say we're going to do this, but we never do. But we're getting better.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do.
No. We're getting better. So, but this is quite important. So, if you're stuck at home during lockdown, you know what I mean. You've got time on your hands, so it's the sort of thing you might be able to do now that you couldn't do previously.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's partly why that Black Lives Matter has really taken off in the way it has at the moment because of lockdown. You know, it's captured people's attention in a way. Arguably, it should have done, you know, last year, the year before, when Ferguson happened.
Well, it's been going
prior
on
to that.
I mean, it's
the 1992 LA riots. You know, like
the 60s, civil rights, slavery. You know, it's an ongoing battle, isn't it? It's been going on for hundreds of years. It's a continuation of.
But I think you know, it's really because it is lockdown. You know, people have time to pay attention to these things, to really think about these things and consider what's happening in the world and what sort of world we want to come out of lockdown into. As well.
Yeah. Well, you can do your homework, can't you?
Yeah.
You know, and I know, like, marches, I mean, it's the sort of trendy thing to do is to go on a march, but, you know, I think if instead of going on the march, if you don't want to, or, you know, as an alternative, like you say, you can do things from home. You can sign a petition, you can share it with your friends and family, you can just talk about it with people that you know, find articles, share them, write a letter to your MP. There's other ways to be an activist other than, like, you know, going and shouting at police officers or, well, you know, shouting, you know what I'm saying. It's more than one way to skin a cat, so yeah. So check out as well, if you're on Twitter, hashtag 5xmore, and you'll see some women.
Good to know.
Yeah, get it out there.
I've decided to talk about Yarlswood Immigration Detention Centre because this is something that affects black women and Asian women as well, and South American women. But yeah, so Yarlswood Immigration Detention Centre, basically, if you have immigration status that is brought into question or becomes unstable, you are detained or might be detained if you're a woman. It houses primarily women, some adult families and few amount of men, but mostly women. You will be detained at Yarlswood whilst you're waiting. And most women in the UK that are in immigration detention in the UK are held at Yarlswood. It's the biggest facility. It's about 400 women it can hold. But yeah, it's been a horror show. It's been an absolute horror show, and it pops up in the news every few years maybe, and it's on our radars, and then it just disappears again. But I looked up a bit of history about it, some of the stuff that's going on there. So according to a Freedom of Information request, in 2015, the average length of stay there was 31 days. And in January 2015, the longest stay was 354 days.
It's about a year then.
Yep. But then I read another report. So in 2015, so the same year, but later in that year, there was somebody who had been there for about 18 months. Yeah.
So basically, it's like going to prison, but you haven't really committed a crime. Like you get less for kiddie porn, don't you?
Yeah. And it come up in the news because there'd been allegations of sexual assault as well. But in 2014, there was a UN inspector. She was the special rapporteur for violence against women. She's called Rashida Manju, and she asked to see Yarlswood as part of her UK tour, and she didn't see Yarlswood in the end. The Home Office organised a different itinerary for her. She went to see a different immigration detention centre. She saw, I think, a mostly male facility. But yeah, in 2015 there was a report, and I want to quote some of this. So they said, this is verbatim from the report. We were particularly concerned about the length of time some women were detained and the detention of the most vulnerable women without clear reason. The longest person held there was 18 months. And the Home Office has has actually said in guidelines that you shouldn't detain pregnant women. But the previous year, in 2014, 99 pregnant women were detained at Yarlswood.
Okay.
And like the Home Office is saying, yeah, well, you shouldn't do this to pregnant women.
Yeah, well, no, you shouldn't. It's not the best place to, carry a child, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And only 9, right, this is another thing. So you just mentioned that it's like they're being in prison for something they haven't done. But so out of 99 pregnant women that were detained in 2014, only 9 were actually removed from the UK. The rest were released back into the community.
Okay.
So they shouldn't have been there.
Why are they going there? Do we have any information about what's...
It's a hostile environment, really. It's kind of a bunch of other factors. Sometimes they're not very good at advocating for themselves because they're kind of... A lot of these women are sort of... They're not quite aware of the systems that we have in place, and they're locked out. Some of the language is it's not very clear, and they're locked out of these systems, and then they're just kind of turfed into Yarlswood.
Do they tend to be like working class people or lower class people?
Yeah, English as a second language, things like that, all these things. In the 6 months prior to this inspection, in 2015, more than double those removed from the UK elsewhere after being in Yarlswood, more than double were released back into the community in the UK, which raises a question: why are they doing it in the first place? So,
it must cost a fortune as much as anything else. Like how much? I know how much it costs to keep a prisoner in prison, so it would be similar.
Yeah, it was in the 6 months prior to the report. It was 443 women were removed from the UK and 894 were released back in.
Okay.
And the report also found that the healthcare provided had declined. It wasn't very good. It's provided by G4S.
Our friends at G4S. Yeah. But they're the ones who messed up the security at the Olympics, and the army had to come and bail them out, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's all sorts of dodgy fingers in dodgy pies.
Yeah, they used to do the cleaning at my hospital.
Oh, did they?
And they were useless.
Yeah. So Yarlswood is run by Serco, in like the government's great idea of outsourcing everything it bloody can. It's run by Serco, but the healthcare is provided by G4S. These people returned in 2017 for another report. They said that some stuff had improved, right? This got me. In the report, it said, like, we've seen great improvement, and especially in these 3 key areas. And then it said, but there was some concern because there was a doctor there who'd been there since 2016 and he didn't have the proper registration. This is of great concern to us. And I'm thinking, how can you say how much has improved when there's massive safeguarding issues like that? And that report found that there was still 70% of the women detained in Yarlswood were released back into the community. So why are they detaining these women?
Hostile environment then.
Yeah. Conditions were really so bad that in 2018, 120 women went on a hunger strike. And I couldn't really find any follow-up to that. I assume that they're not still hunger striking and that some stuff improved. But there's 120 women felt that they needed to do this. And it's just shocking. And there's a lot of trafficking victims that are detained for months at a time there. You know, you've been traumatised once and you're going back into somewhere like that. It's just awful. There's been, between 2013 and 2015, there were 6 allegations of sexual assault made by guards. And a lot of these women are running because they're, you know, they can't, they're asylum seekers and they can't be in their own countries because a lot of them are same-sex attracted. They're lesbians or bisexual women.
Yeah.
There was one case study I was reading of this woman. She was from Nigeria and she was a lesbian, but she got married to a man because she couldn't be an out lesbian. And he beat her and stuff, and he brought her over to the UK, and she was in a really abusive relationship. She got out, but then she didn't feel like she couldn't tell the asylum seeker that she was the officer that she was seeking asylum on account of her sexuality because she'd hidden it for so long because it was so
She's
hard.
like closeted, really, isn't she?
Yeah. And then
it's hard enough coming out in England in like 2020. Like, so when you've got a country that executes gay people, then it's a lot more difficult to recognise yourself, isn't it?
Does Nigeria actually have the death penalty? I'm not sure, but a lot of countries do, and like
you know, it's an easy thing for us to sort of take for granted the sort of liberties that we have in this country, whereas most countries it's if it's not criminalised, then it's severely socially sanctioned.
Yeah, and I mean, it might not be the death penalty, but you know you're still gonna get beaten up in the streets or whatever.
Corrective rape, though, isn't it, for women? Very often in these
Yep.
countries, you forget that, like, you know, you're not allowed to have a choice about your sexuality. You're not even allowed to be like celibate. You know.
Yeah, you just get married off.
Yeah.
You know, and this is something that really affects these women, and you know they can't. It's not. Yeah. But I was looking at the ethnic breakdown actually, and found something from 2018. So it was actually China was the biggest ethnic group, Chinese people.
Really?
Yeah, Chinese women. And then it was Brazil, then Romania, then Nigeria.
Okay.
They were the 4 biggest ethnic groups in Yarlswood. So I actually started this as Black Lives Matter. Because a lot of black women are affected by it, but it seems that there's kind of been a slight shift in demographics coming through, or maybe just demographics that are rounded up with the hostile environment. Yeah,
well, that's what I find so interesting about the hostile environment, is what I find so troubling and worrying, and the reason why it's such a bad system is that it relies, as far as I'm aware, it's policed by citizens and not the police. So if you're an employer or a landlord, you have a duty to do investigations into the people who are applying for like a property or who work for you. So you basically just reflect the biases of the country. So I imagine that, you know, an Australian or an American, a white person would not necessarily be perceived as an illegal immigrant or thought of in the same way that a Chinese or a Nigerian person may be.
Exactly.
And this is why you get in the disparities in like racial disparities in people who are like collared for it.
And we call them expats, we don't call them immigrants.
Well, you know, expatriate,
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And a lot of these women as well, so they're kind of, when they are released, a lot of them are released back into, like, some of the conditions of their release are released straight back into the communities that they've actually tried to get away from because they've been brought over, they've either been trafficked or they're working off debts for, you know, a dodgy family or a dodgy company or something, and sometimes they're released straight back into that environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking the amount of actually slaves there are even in this country, people who are indebted
There are more slaves today than there ever have been in the past, but that's because there's more
there's
people alive today.
There's
than
like
there
10
ever
times
has
more
been,
people alive,
than
but
ever has been in history. So it's like law of averages. But yeah, it's just and again, this is
okay. Modern slavery.
Oh, here we go.
13,000 estimated slaves in the UK.
God.
Well, victims of trafficking, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they've worked. I'm sorry, I've literally just Googled this. Maybe should have done more preparation. But, I mean, I wonder, you know, trafficking, you know, like a lot of women in the sex industry, most of the women who work as prostitutes in this country are from places like Eastern Europe, Romanian, African. So it's interesting that the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't have more fought for, the, you know, women, the, you know, black women who work as prostitutes. You know, it's interesting that the same people who advocate, it's like a social justice milieu where the same people that advocate that Black Lives Matter also want to legalise prostitution.
Yeah,
which,
sex workers work,
Yeah, which would have a hugely detrimental impact on black, Asian minority ethnic women. So I think there's a big contradiction in the aims of the movement.
Yeah.
And obviously not all Black Lives Matter people, it's a huge movement itself.
Yeah.
But there is a certain subsection
that maybe say slogans and don't really think about what they're saying and what the actual impacts are.
Yeah.
When
It's
they're
just
saying sex workers work.
Sex workers work and, you know, all this stuff. It's easy to say, but it's actually, if you join it up, you know.
What you were just saying about the amount of people, victims of slavery now, and you don't know how they work that out. Somebody told me this. I don't know how true this is, right? But in order to kind of understand how many illegal immigrants, and I hate this phrasing illegal immigrants as well, because I don't think like a person is
It's not legal.
It's not illegal.
Yeah.
But, you know, they don't have the correct documentation.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, how do we actually do it? Because the whole point is they're undocumented, so we can't trace them. And can you guess? So they took a town. They were like, right, we have the census, or we have how many people here are registered on the council lists in this town, but we want to know how many people are actually here. Can you guess how they did it?
How?
Just guess. Just take a wild guess.
They divided it by, I don't know.
Oh, you're thinking too lofty. Think grittier. They went to the sewers and they measured how much excrement that town produced. Because that's like, you can't hide how much people are eating and how much people are shitting, and that's how they...
So they worked out the average. That sounds like a really weird way to go about, like, figuring it out. Is that like...
Well, it's not something you can hide, though, you know? Like, how else would they do it?
I don't know.
Bar knocking on every door.
I mean, okay, that's very creative.
Yeah, they measured how much excrement there was in the town.
Okay.
Going through the sewers.
What did they find?
That there was a lot more people than the town said that there was in the. But, you know, anecdotally, you see that as well. You know, you see there's a lot of like male labourers that get trafficked over actually as well, and they're sleeping like 8 to a bedroom. You know, it's really bad. And you know, you see it sometimes depending on where you are in the country. But yeah, that's how they did it. But I think it just basically, it goes to show that the hostile environment it's a disaster. It's not helping anybody. And it's in fact penalising some of the most vulnerable women. And disproportionately affecting Asian and black women. And I just think it needs to stop. I think it's not a very good idea. And if you can write to your MP, we say it all the time, you can write to your MP or write to your councillors as well. I've recently not come round to the idea, but become more aware of the importance of your councillors and how useful they can actually be to you. If there's stuff happening in your town, sometimes your councillor, your local councillor might be a bit better than your MP.
Well, they can be plugged into the council and to the people who can make change, and various arms of the local government, I suppose.
Yeah. And they can help. There's plenty of women's groups as well. There's the Lesbian Immigration Support Group.
Oh, yes.
That offers support to women.
Fantastic organisation.
Yeah.
Really grassroots.
Yeah, who are seeking asylum on account of their sexuality. So they were actually looking for a bit of help during lockdown as well. So I gave a bit of money to them. We can put a link in the description as well. But they're great charity?
They don't get any money from the government or sort of central
Oh, do they not?
authority.
Is it
Well, it's all. I think it's all.
fundraising?
Well, it's a very. I think best off with a lot of charities. It's best off to find a small local one than a big organisation, because all the money gets taken up in like administration fees, and actually the infrastructure of the charity itself becomes more important than actually delivering the services of the charity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've taken two interesting avenues there, and hopefully, you know, maybe because at the moment a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff is about educating yourself as well, because you might not be aware of these things. So I feel like I've educated myself a little bit, and I hopefully we've educated you guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I've learnt a lot going off and finding out about the 5 times more. It's shocking, and the frustrating thing is, like, educate yourself. It's like, I can't. We don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
So actually, it's a call to the government: educate yourself, educate us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do your work, Boris. So, we are very much aware that this is 2 white women talking about the oppression of black women. So, if you really want to go out there and find some black women to listen to directly, we've got a couple of recommendations.
Yeah.
Claire Heuchan. I'm sorry, Claire, this is not how you pronounce your name. Sister Outrider. She has a blog. She writes very well about issues of class, race, in feminism, and in the wider society. She's a Scottish lass. Scottish lass.
She's lesbian as well.
She's a lesbian.
Yeah, really interesting writing.
Yeah, and she says that I'm a great DJ.
Oh, does she?
She liked my set. That's not why I'm recommending her, obviously. But yeah, top lass. And who are you going to recommend?
I think Linda Bellos. I just think she's great. You
proper love Linda Bellos,
I do. She's instrumental in making Black History Month UK a thing. Like that was just her.
Did she start it?
Yeah, I think she was. She definitely led the campaign to get it taught in schools and stuff. She's lesbian as well. She's Jewish. She's a Labour activist. She's previously run, I think. She's also she had her kids taken off her for a bit because she was lesbian as well. So, you know, she's been through some stuff. I've met her very briefly, and she's a really warm woman, really lovely.
There's a podcast about her, I believe, on Feminist Current.
Is there?
Yeah, there is, if you want to learn more.
Oh, I'm going to have to listen to that.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Little plug there.
There's plenty of other people on Twitter as well, and there's some good blogs as well. I think
What's one we like?
We've been talking about Lipstick Alley.
Lipstick Alley we like. It's an American one, isn't it?
But it's funny.
True story. It's not Thursday, is it?
What is that? No, it's Monday.
Fireworks. It's fireworks. Sorry, there's fireworks going off. They're celebrating the return of the podcast.
And we've got our little Women Who Dare.
No, we've not. We've got to do an event, haven't we?
We've got an event as well.
Yeah, sorry. Right. So we're in lockdown. Usually we like to finish with, like, you know, a little bit of events and stuff. But everyone's in lockdown, so no one's going nowhere. But we're doing loads of, like, webinars, and I found this really good one. So there's an online meeting hosted by the Hackney Communist Party called Race and Class, Past and Present. So you're going to have speaking Beverly Woodburn. She's a Hackney resister, a black community activist and a trade unionist. She's going to be talking about the hostile environment from Windrush to COVID. Also speaking is Gordon Castile. Unfortunately, he is a man, but he's top top lad, trade union activist. He's going to be talking about what is to be done. And also we have Mary Davis. She's a Labour historian. She's going to be looking at Labour, race and empire. That is at this Thursday, the 25th of June. The Eventbrite details have not yet been released, but we'll put them on in the description, so you can check that out if you want to take yourself down there. That looks really, really interesting.
It does,
that
actually,
one.
yeah. I think I'm going to
check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to finish up as we usually finish up.
Yeah, with our Women Who Dare. And we couldn't remember whose turn it was to read, because we've had a bit of a break from the podcast, because I went travelling and then I came back and it was lockdown. But we'll just start.
Do you want to do it? Because you're better at reading than me, aren't you?
So the woman we're talking about today is Wilma Rudolph. Her card says American 1940 to 1994. Of all the examples in modern sport of triumph over adversity, Wilma Rudolph stands as one of the most inspiring, moving from barely being able to walk to becoming the first female triple Olympic gold medalist in track and field. At age 4, Rudolph was struck by polio, which paralysed her left leg, and it took 5 years of concerted effort before she could walk without a leg brace. She immediately took up basketball, later becoming a star player for her high school, competing in track and field events and setting her sights on the Olympics. At the 1960 Olympics in Rome, she won gold medals in the 100 and 200 metre events and anchored the 4x100, so the relay, is that? She competed for 2 more years, continuing her winning ways and amassing numerous awards and honours. After retiring from competition in 1962, Rudolph married and had 5 children, taught school, and served in a variety of capacities to promote running, development of female athletes, and wider opportunities for black youth. In 1981, she established the Wilma Rudolph Foundation, an organisation dedicated to training young athletes. That's really cool.
Never heard of her before.
I haven't either. I think I read somewhere that the one of the most common and best ways out of poverty for young black girls is sport scholarships and stuff like that. It helps them get to college. So yeah, cool lady.
Yeah, she's top, isn't she?
Right, that's it from us, and hopefully, you know, as stuff starts to ease, we'll be able to get out more content and stuff like that.
We've got some interviews to edit and put out there as well, and
Yep.
we'll probably try to do some during lockdown.
Yeah.
Because everyone's stuck in their houses, aren't they?
Yeah, and in the meantime, take care of yourself and wash your hands.
Dirty pick.